My name's Tyler, and I had just turned 21 that summer. After finishing my third year of college in Chicago, I decided to take a break and come back to my hometown, a quiet, leafy suburb just outside Milwaukee. My parents had always kept the house warm and welcoming, and being home felt like hitting pause on the chaos of my life. I didn't expect anything unusual to happen during those few months. I figured I'd work a part-time job, help around the house, maybe catch up with a few old friends and save some money. What I didn't expect was her. Her name was Lauren. She was 34, lived 3 houses down from us, and was one of those women who had a kind of magnetic presence. You know, the type, not loud, not flashy, just composed, elegant, and sharp in a way that made you want to sit up straighter when she was in the room. I'd known her since I was a teenager, sort of. She used to come to our barbecues with her husband when I was still in high school, but after their divorce 2 years ago, we didn't see her much. At least not until this summer. Started out with something small. My mom had asked me to drop off a folding table that Lauren had loaned us for a family gathering. I wheeled it over on a humid afternoon, expecting a quick thanks and to be on my way, but she invited me in. The air conditioning hit me as soon as I stepped inside, and her house smelled like vanilla and something faintly floral. Clean, quiet, comfortable, like her. We chatted briefly. Nothing deep. She asked me about school, what I was majoring in, if I had plans after college. I told her I was still figuring it out. She smiled and said, "Everyone is." That first visit turned into another the following week when she asked if I could help fix a jammed window in her guest bedroom. I'm not exactly handy, but I gave it a shot. Then another day she asked if I could carry in some boxes she had in her trunk. One thing led to another, and before I realized it, I was at her house almost every other day. It was never anything big. Fixing a broken cabinet hinge, carrying in groceries, helping her set up a shelf. I never felt like she was taking advantage. She always thanked me genuinely, even paid me once, which I refused. It didn't feel like a job. Felt like she enjoyed the company, and I did too. There was something about Lauren that made being around her easy but also oddly tense. She didn't flirt, not overtly, but there was a softness to her voice when she spoke to me. She'd touch my arm lightly when passing me a glass of iced tea. Her eyes lingered a little longer than they should have. Or maybe I imagined it. Once, I helped her bring in some plants from the backyard during a storm. We stood in her hallway dripping from the rain, laughing like kids. She handed me a towel. Our hands touched for a moment, and it was like something electric passed between us. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second, I forgot how old I was. I forgot everything except the way she smelled like rosemary and rainwater, and how her eyes caught the light just right. But we never said anything. Not really. She was always polite, always poised, and I kept it cool too. What else was I supposed to do? I mean, she was older. She had been married. She had a real career, a real life, and I was just the neighbor's kid home for the summer, living with his parents, eating cereal out of the box and sleeping in a room with posters from high school still on the walls. But then one Sunday, my parents were hosting a neighborhood dinner and Lauren stopped by. She wore a light blue dress that hugged her figure but wasn't trying too hard. She greeted everyone, smiled that same warm smile, and eventually made her way over to me while I was manning the grill. She complimented the burgers, sipped from her wine glass, and laughed when I said something self-deprecating about my cooking skills. Later that night, as people were leaving, she lingered by the fence while I was stacking chairs. It was just the two of us. The crickets were loud, and the porch light behind me cast a yellow glow between us. She looked at me for a long second, then said, "You've grown up so much, Tyler. I hardly recognize you." I shrugged, smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, college changes people, I guess." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable, then turned to go. "It suits you," she said over her shoulder. The growing up. That night, lying in bed, her words looped in my head. I didn't sleep much. I was starting to notice her in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. And the truth was, I didn't know if she was just being friendly or if maybe something else was stirring beneath the surface. Whatever it was, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The following few days were a blur. I kept myself busy, running errands for my parents, catching up with a couple friends who were also back in town for the summer, but none of it felt present. My mind kept drifting back to Lauren, that lingering moment at the fence, the look in her eyes when she said I'd grown up. I replayed it a dozen times, wondering if there was something behind it or if I was just reading into things. Then came Thursday evening. It was hot and muggy, even as the sun went down. I was walking back from the gas station with a cold soda in hand when I saw Lauren out front, kneeling in her flower bed, trying to fix a broken garden light. She looked up, smiled, and shaded her eyes. "Tyler, you're just the guy I need?" she said, standing and brushing her hands on her jeans. "Do you have 5 minutes?" "Always," I replied, my throat a little dry, and not from the heat. She invited me inside. The air conditioning was on low, barely humming, and the house smelled like lemongrass this time. She pointed toward the hallway, the light in the guest bathrooms flickering again. "I think I need to replace the bulb, but it's the weird kind I never remember how to get out." As I followed her, I noticed how casually she carried herself, barefoot. Her toenails painted a soft coral color, her white blouse just a little loose at the shoulders. My heart kicked up a notch, but I pushed the thought away and focused on the task. While I stood on a small stool unscrewing the bulb, she leaned on the doorframe behind me. "I feel bad always asking you to help," she said. "You should be out enjoying your summer." I smiled over my shoulder. "I like helping. Gives me a reason to feel useful." There was a pause. "Well, you've been a big help," she said, her voice softer now. "More than you probably realize." I stepped down from the stool, holding the old bulb. "All done," I said. She took it from my hand, her fingers brushing mine, and for a split second, I swore she didn't let go immediately. Then she looked at me with that same unreadable gaze, like she was deciding something in her head. "You want something to drink?" she asked. "Sure," I said, trying to sound normal. We sat in the living room with glasses of cold tea. The lights dimmed. The sun had gone down completely by now. A lamp cast a soft amber glow across the room. I noticed how the shadows played against her cheekbones, how her eyes caught the light like a secret trying to slip out. "I used to hate summers," she said suddenly. "When I was married, they always made the cracks feel wider. You know what I mean?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I fully did. "People think when you're older, things make more sense," she continued. "But they don't. You just get better at pretending." She looked over at me. "You're not pretending, though." "Not yet." I didn't know what to say. I just held her gaze. "That's why being around you feels so different," she added, almost to herself. I swallowed. "Different how?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she set her glass down and stood up, walking slowly toward the hallway. Then she turned and said, "Walk me to the back patio?" I followed. Outside, the night was still and thick with summer air. The only sound was the occasional chirp of insects. We stood there, side by side, not touching, not speaking for a moment. She looked up at the sky and said, "When I was your age, I thought I had everything figured out." I smiled faintly. "And now?" She turned to me. Her voice was quiet, steady. "Now I just wish I could go back and do it differently, make different choices." Then she took a slow breath, stepped closer, and said it. "I wish you were 10 years older." My heart stopped. There was no smile, no playful tone. Just her, standing close enough that I could smell the faint perfume she wore. Her eyes locked on mine, searching. I started, but my voice caught. She looked away almost immediately, her face flushed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was stupid." "No," I said quickly. "It's not stupid." She laughed once, softly, almost bitterly. "Come on, Tyler. What am I doing? You're just starting your life. You don't need someone like me throwing confusion at you." I wanted to respond, but I didn't know how. She gave me a small smile, touched my arm gently, just for a moment, and said, "You should get home." And so I did. But that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours. Her words rang louder than they had in person. "I wish you were 10 years older." Was that just a moment of weakness, or something more honest than either of us was ready for? After that night, everything changed. I didn't see Lauren for a few days, not because I was avoiding her, but because I didn't know what to say if I did see her. I kept replaying the moment over and over again in my head. Her voice, soft and serious, the look in her eyes, the way she stepped closer before catching herself. It wasn't just a compliment. It wasn't just a passing comment. It was a confession. A line crossed quietly and without force, but crossed nonetheless. And I didn't know what to do with it. On Sunday, I saw her in her yard trimming her roses. She glanced up when I stepped out to grab the mail. We locked eyes for a second. She gave me a polite smile, tight-lipped, careful, and went back to her garden. I stood there for a moment longer, then went back inside. That night, my parents went out to dinner with some family friends, leaving me alone in the house. I found myself pacing. I couldn't focus on TV, couldn't scroll through my phone without checking her name, wondering if she'd reach out. My chest felt tight. At 8:17 p.m., I did something reckless. I texted her. Me. "Hope the roses are surviving the heat." She didn't reply immediately. I almost regretted sending it. Then 5 minutes later, "Lauren, barely. They miss your help." A pause. Then another text. "Lauren, are you free? I could use a hand with something. If it's not too late." My pulse spiked. I typed back. Me. "I'll be there in 10. I didn't even change shirts. I just grabbed my keys and walked. Her porch light was on. She opened the door before I even knocked. She looked different, nervous, almost. She was wearing a loose, off-white cardigan over a tank top and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a low, effortless knot, and there was no makeup on her face. Just her. "I didn't mean to bother you," she said quickly. "You didn't." She stepped aside and let me in. We walked to the living room, where a small wooden shelf lay half-assembled on the floor. She laughed lightly. It said, "Easy to build." But I think they meant easy if you're an engineer. I knelt down and started piecing it together, trying to calm my breathing. She sat on the floor across from me, watching quietly. After a while, she said, "I'm sorry if I made things weird." "You didn't." She looked at me. "I crossed a line. I know that." I set down a screwdriver and met her gaze. "Lauren, I haven't stopped thinking about that night. She didn't speak. I don't know what it means. I just know I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. She drew in a breath, then let it out slowly. It means I'm lonely, Tyler, and I don't know what I'm doing anymore. We sat there in silence for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Do you want to stay for a bit?" I nodded. We didn't talk much after that. We moved to the couch and sat side by side, the half-finished shelf forgotten for now. A quiet movie played in the background. At some point, her head rested on my shoulder. I didn't move. I wasn't sure how much time passed. Maybe an hour. Maybe two. She stirred and looked up at me. Her face was so close I could feel her breath. "I hate that I hesitated," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Me too. I keep telling myself it's wrong," she said. "That you're too young. That it'll pass. But it doesn't pass. And you're not just some kid anymore, Tyler." She leaned in slowly, as if giving me time to back away. I didn't. Her lips met mine, soft, tentative, then fuller. And just like that, the room shifted. The air grew warmer. The silence was filled with the rhythm of our breath. We didn't rush. It wasn't frantic or wild. It was quiet, deliberate, like something that had been waiting a long time to happen. Afterward, we lay on the couch, side by side, her hand in mine, her head on my chest. Neither of us said a word for a while. Then she whispered, "What are we doing, Tyler?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew this. I didn't regret a second of it. And from the way she squeezed my hand, I don't think she did either. The next morning felt different. Not in a dramatic, everything has changed kind of way. More like the calm after a long-awaited storm. Still air, scattered thoughts, and the quiet thrum of something fragile trying to hold. I woke up before her. We'd fallen asleep curled up on the couch, a thin throw blanket draped over us. The light coming in through the blinds cast soft lines across her face. Peaceful, untouched. Her hand was still resting lightly on my chest, as if her body hadn't yet realized the night had ended. I didn't want to move, but I did. Slowly, carefully, I slid out from beneath her and stood. My shirt was wrinkled, my mouth dry. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, letting everything settle. What had we done? And more importantly, what did it mean? I wasn't some teenager playing pretend. I knew the weight of what had happened. But I also wasn't naive enough to believe we could go back to before. That moment on the couch, the kiss, the hours that followed. It had changed everything between us. She stirred shortly after and walked into the kitchen, barefoot, wearing the same cardigan loosely draped. Her hair was slightly tousled, but her eyes were clear when she looked at me. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Hey." She hesitated, then crossed the space between us. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Are you?" She smiled faintly. "I don't know." We sat down at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee in silence. "I don't regret last night," she finally said. "But I also don't want to pretend like it didn't happen. That wouldn't be fair to either of us." "I agree." She tapped her fingers on the mug. "I'm scared, Tyler. Not of you, of what this could mean. I'm older. I've been through things you haven't yet. People will judge. You might wake up one day and realize it was just a phase." Her voice cracked slightly on that last part. I reached across the table and touched her hand. "That's not how I feel." "I know," she whispered, "but it's how I've been taught to protect myself from things that feel too good." We spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking, Not just about what had happened, but about life. About her divorce, her fears, how she hadn't let anyone in for years. About me, college, how I'd always seen her not as just my friend's mom, but as someone deeply human, kind, strong, and yes, beautiful. That week, we didn't try to define anything. We just spent time together, walking at dusk, cooking dinner, reading on the patio, always with this invisible thread between us. Not hidden, but quiet, sacred. Eventually, summer ended. I went back to college. We texted, called, saw each other during breaks. Carefully, thoughtfully. There were challenges. Of course there were. There still are. But one thing never changed: how it started. That one moment when she looked me in the eyes and said, "I wish you were 10 years older." She told me once, months later, that she'd never meant for me to respond. She just needed to say it, to let the truth out into the open, even if only once. And I told her something back, something I hadn't known until then, that maybe I wasn't 10 years older, but I knew enough to know what it meant to love someone honestly.